and D for delivery, and that delivery by DEFRA. These priorities for DEFRA, I hope, indicate how we will work together in the years ahead. Now, conference, we are meeting at a time when we are all still feeling the economic aftershocks of COVID, with global supply chains still recovering and exacerbated by the fallout from Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, one of the most important agricultural countries in the world, having an impact on everything from the cost of inputs to the price of food, impacts that are causing sleepless nights for families across the country, for many of you, and indeed right around the world. Now, we can be proud of the way that we are standing shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine through this terrible ordeal, including our support for the heroic farmers getting the harvest in amid the turmoil of war and sharing it with some of the world's poorest and most vulnerable people. And while we may have rejoiced at the video of Ukraine tractors towing away Russian tanks, we extended financial support for the Grain from Ukraine programme, and critically, with our scientific expertise on grain verification, we are protecting their grain from being stolen by the Russians and frustrating the Russian efforts to profit from theft. And it's vitally important that we continue to stand with our allies in defence of the freedom, democracy, and common decency that we treasure so deeply. And back in the UK, all this comes on top of the impact of historic flooding and drought in an ever-changing climate. As Mark Spencer set out yesterday, we understand the pressures you are under. We have sought to help even further with the cash flow challenges you face. Now, we'd already put in place the farming profit averaging tax relief. Last year, we also brought forward BPS payments to be twice a year for the first time ever, and which we will continue to do. And recognising the particularly virulent strain of avian influenza, we introduced urgent measures to protect the sector, we kept the free-range brand going, and we modified the compensation scheme. We acted to help with rising input costs, including action on fuel duty, energy bills, and business rates. And it's why we will strengthen our focus nationally on energy security, as well as the supplies of critical minerals and fertiliser we need. And why we must continue to work together to forge a more secure, more sustainable future for farming so we can feed a changing world. Conference, we are on a journey in agriculture. We finally left the European Union. We still have a strong trade agreement with the EU, and we are expanding our trade agreements around the world. They are a two-way street, and our new dedicated agricultural attachés in key markets are bolstering our efforts to increase exports, in addition to what our diplomatic corps are already doing on trade. Now, leaving the CAP with its tick box approach, accompanied by the tape measures, the tut-tut tones, alongside the threat of fines, clawbacks, infraction measures, that's really given us the opportunity to design a new way to support our farmers and achieve public goods for public money. Our shared mission across society is to reach net zero and strengthen the resilience of our environment so that in turn we strengthen the resilience of our businesses and our communities. And I find farmers are the first to insist that these things can and must go hand in hand if we are to improve the prosperity and food security of every generation to come as well. But without these, we won't even have a future to even consider. Now, the combination of environment and agriculture in one department under one Secretary of State is pretty rare, if not unique, around the world. And that has allowed us to design policies and funding schemes that are not combative, but are intended to be complementary, to make space for nature and continue sustainable food production. They're not mutually exclusive. In fact, I believe the two can and must be symbiotic. Now, in practice, a lot of this is not new. It is rediscovering, to some extent, the agricultural techniques of our parents and grandparents, but marrying them with the latest scientific innovation. Access to clean water, healthier and productive soil, abundant pollinators. These are all absolutely critical to producing good food. And as the NFU have regularly pointed out, tackling climate change is key for the industry. That's why we've worked with you to design, develop, and deploy new and much improved programs. It's our intention to make it straightforward for farmers to participate, whether you're a tenant or landowner, an upland farmer or commoner, a new entrant or a veteran. Moving away from a system where over half the subsidy went to just 10% of the farmers based on how much land you had, towards choosing from our pick and mix menu, which is deliberately flexible, so you can choose what works best for your farm as part of your plan to improve the productivity, profitability, sustainability, and resilience of your business for the future. And I recognise that you also need access to labour, steady energy and fertiliser prices, a good deal with buyers, and strong biosecure borders. And I will continue to work on all of these issues and more alongside Mark. But we are on that journey now from cap to elms. It was my predecessor, Michael Gove, who laid the foundations and mapped out the journey with the Health and Harmony White Paper back in 2018, which is reinforced by our 2019 manifesto. George Eustace piloted the Agriculture Act through Parliament and set about designing the smooth transition. And as we make these changes, the total level of funding to farmers absolutely remains unchanged. That's £2.4 billion, just as we committed in our manifesto. And we also set out in our national food strategy how we want to help farmers and consumers. We made a commitment to Parliament on a report on the state of our nation's food security at least once every 3 years. And currently we have self-sufficiency just under about 2/3, providing us with amazing food from farm to fork. And we want to maintain at least that, if not consider higher. Something we will be discussing at the forthcoming Food Security Summit later this year, just as the Prime Minister assured you, Minette. But we know that the security of your businesses is not just about funding you can get from the government. Far from it. While A is for agriculture, B is for biosecurity. That's biosecurity at the borders of the country and at the borders of individual farms. Of course, our borders can and must be an effective first line of defence in securing a safe, healthy environment and safe, healthy food, helping us to tackle problems before they can spread, giving the market confidence in the outstanding quality of the goods that we produce in the country and trade with our partners around the world. That is a key element of our new plant biosecurity strategy, our plan for the next 5 years of action, and we will be saying even more soon about how we'll be enhancing biosecurity controls at our borders even further. So we make things more straightforward and less burdensome, embracing innovation and digitisation, and targeting those, frankly, who let the side down, while trusting those who consistently do the right thing. So we will incentivise compliance, support the flow of trade, and promote the high standards that are synonymous with the best of British around the world. But from the very dark days of foot and mouth to the fight against African swine fever, to the ongoing fight against salmonella, and to eradicate bovine TB by 2038, we know from experience just what is at stake, and that action on farms is critical. Now, in some areas and some markets, we're only just recovering from events that we endured decades ago. And frankly, I have to say, this keeps me up at night, just as it does many of you. So now I know that we all want to do whatever we can to make sure that no farmer, no business, no community has to go through anything similar ever again. And it's right that as well as investing in our first phase, £200 million into our science capability in the animal health programme at Weybridge, we're making sure you have the support you need to improve animal welfare as a vitally important part of our plans through the animal health and welfare pathway. So we stop diseases from spreading like wildfire, as we know they can. But we also need to grasp innovation opportunities. Farmers have always been at the heart of animal health and welfare, and we know it's absolutely vital to strengthening the biosecurity and preventing diseases. Indeed, data on this unprecedented outbreak of avian influenza, both in scale and spread in wild birds and poultry farms, underlines the need for us to rise to the increased threats of diseases. And for each infection in recent months, a weakness in on-farm biosecurity has often been found as the most likely source of infection. So we need to address that as a matter of urgency. In all cases, we will continue to push to make sure that we are tackling the issues at source and throughout the supply chain where that is, if that is what is needed as well. And of course, taking action to secure good animal health is at the heart of our plan to make even greater progress on reducing our reliance on antibiotics as well. So we take on that threat of antimicrobial resistance that is already costing more than 1 million lives around the world every single year. We know that it works, and we've more than halved our usage. So we are working with you to do even more. And where technology can help us harness the awesome power of nature, like the plant science and precision breeding, improving the resilience of crops, we need to do even more to combine the power of our world-leading scientific expertise with the energy of entrepreneurial enterprise. We need to get cutting-edge, game-changing technology and innovation out of labs and into the fields. Breakthroughs like the new strains of wheat being developed at the John Innes Centre in Norwich that are more resistant to climate change and more resilient to pests. They have a huge potential to help us feed the world and do it without the need for quite so many pesticides, particularly those harmful to pollinators. But we need to scale up, and it's important that our Prime Minister has just created a brand new department to give it leadership and focus. So I expect our prominent research institutes to start to take advantage of the new freedoms that we are bringing to life, including through the precision breeding bill that the NFU have supported from the get-go, and it should receive royal assent very soon. I turn to sea, and I talked about conservation. I've spent quite a lot of time on nature, but sea can also be for the countryside. I want us to respect and support our cherished rural ways of life, whether that's making sure people can enjoy the beauty of our landscapes and coastlines, and do so responsibly, or making sure that a young person in rural Cornwall or Cumbria feels that they can have the opportunities they need to flourish, levelling up the things that help people live long and fulfilling lives wherever they live. And that's exactly what we are doing. As set out in our rural proofing report last year, we're also making sure we secure the future of village halls that are the hub of communities across the country, to investing in your connectivity, tripling the value of vouchers now available under the Gigabit Broadband Voucher Scheme, making sure people working in the most rural parts of the Lake District can be as connected as people here in the heart of Birmingham. We continue to have new trials to beam broadband in the hardest to reach rural areas directly from satellites in space. And we're funding the Institute for Agriculture and Horticulture to help create the conditions we need to retain generations of experience, develop promising talent, and attract new recruits into the sector. And we want to support the productivity of our rural businesses, and my department will ensure that rural is a common core component of the government's Levelling Up mission. Now, rarely need there be a conflict between conservation and the countryside, but I saw firsthand in Suffolk very early as an MP, in fact as a candidate, that when there was a proposal to reintroduce the sea eagle, farmers were really worried about what this would do to their livestock, particularly given the extent of free-range farming in that part of the country. Now, while we've had some successful translocations and reintroductions of species, I don't want farmers to constantly have to worry about these issues. We've got plenty to do with the habitats that need improving and expanding. Yes, we do want more breeding sites for our birds. Yes, we do want to make sure that raptors are not persecuted and then people who take them down get prosecuted. And I also welcome the focus from many police forces on hare coursing. But that is why I won't be supporting reintroductions of species like lynx or wolves. We just don't need to, and we won't do. Finally, D for delivery. Delivery from DEFRA and delivery from the government. Now, I'm very conscious there was a concern that D could have been D for delay. I can assure you I'm determined as a Secretary of State that we will be the department that delivers. In the first 100 days in the job, though, we have got on with delivering. I was acutely conscious about some of the uncertainty as the BPS elements start to fall. That guaranteed income starts to be replaced with being paid for providing services. That's why, in arriving in the department, not long after our new farming minister, I wanted to make sure that more options were available to farmers this year. So instead of 3 new SFI standards, we have 6. We've also made sure we had an option to help upland farmers, and it was critical that we included integrated pest management. By using nature-based approaches to managing pests rather than over-reliance on pesticides, you can reduce your costs, make your farm businesses more resilient, and contribute to better water quality and thriving wildlife, all while reducing your carbon emissions. I mean, frankly, what's not to like? We've set ourselves a target of 70% of agricultural land and 70% of farm holdings to be covered by our new farming schemes by 2028. And it's our job to make the schemes as attractive as possible so that you want to join. And I hope you will all take a look. Going further, we know that when farmers really work together on these ways of helping nature, the combined impact they achieve can be much greater than the sum of its parts. And to get the most out of countryside stewardship, which we are not reinventing the wheel on, we're keeping that going, I've asked officials to design a premium to encourage farmers to genuinely join up and be rewarded with a premium of CS+, so we can get those corridors of hedgerows or similar to be this super highway for nature in the countryside. I also introduced a new management payment of up to £1,000 to cover your costs for delivering SFI. We've increased payment rates under countryside stewardship. And while Mark Spencer is closely looking at all of the recommendations from the ROC Review, over 70 of them, we wanted to make sure that new farming schemes deliver for tenants. And we've already acted by making it easier for tenant farmers to participate, for example, like making available 3-year SFI agreements. I think this builds on the extensive work already delivered by concerted governments, with grants of productivity, innovation, technology and equipment, having provided 10,000 farmers with support and advice through the Resilience Fund, ensuring all farmers can access the successful catchment-sensitive farming programme, providing seed funding to the newly created industry body for agriculture to boost skills, and piloting new ways to support entrance to the sector. We've announced 45,000 visas. We removed the 25% tariff on maize imports from the USA to help with feed costs. We're pushing ahead with our supply chain reviews into pigs and dairy, which we will conclude soon. But I just want to make sure that DEFRA will be delivering for you, just as you deliver the great British food that we enjoy day in and day out. Now, lastly, I want to recognise that much of what lies ahead will not be easy. We know that, but it is essential. And we know that if we work together, we can get this done and get it right. So we do right by each other and right by future generations to come. So we hold on to what makes our countryside so special, while we secure sustainable, resilient, profitable farm businesses that we need to keep our country fed for generations to come. That is what is at stake, and I'll do what I can to help you see it through. So thank you again for all your hard work and perseverance. And Minette, I look forward to answering questions from your members. Thank you very much.
Secretary of State, thank you very much indeed. I know we're on a tight time schedule because you have to
We've got to go back and vote.
To vote. Look, if I could get, please, Richard Bramley and Lewis Barraclough to a microphone, please. Look, I'm delighted that the Prime Minister, I've talked a lot about this domestic food security summit that he's agreed to host. When I met him before Christmas, he said we must get that done in the early part of the year. But I'm conscious in August he made some really important commitments. He came to our headquarters for the hustings. Liz Truss, of course, did hers in London. And he talked about, you mentioned reporting every 3 years. He talked about annual reporting and setting a target and not allowing that to slip. And it was interesting, yesterday, the leader of the opposition made a big play on 50% of food to be British, local. That was a commitment that he made. Do you think those two things will be in place before the election?
Well, in terms of the reports, we have to at least every 3 years. It's quite a significant report. We've done our first one. I'm very conscious that I want to make sure DEFRA resources are well structured on trying to get outcomes and to help and achieve that. I mean, we've said in our manifesto commitment that we wanted to keep that level of food production. That's absolutely my intention to do so. I mean, there are some legal issues. The leader of the opposition clearly may not be entirely au fait with all the different WTO and elements like that, but there's no doubt through our aspects of our procurement and our food strategy, we're very clear. We want people to buy the best that's on offer.
And British.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, we do have a seasonal industry. So it's not like we can supply every single bit of food that people want every day of the year. And certainly there's plenty of food we can't produce at all, as you'll be aware. But, there's this element that we want to continue to have a sustainable British farming industry, for sure.
Absolutely. Richard Bramley.
Yes, hello, Secretary of State, and welcome. Richard Bramley, I'm a farmer from York, chair of the NFU Environment Forum. Government has promised, as you pointed out, that the CAP budget will be returned to farmers. Though we've seen a gradual removal of the established payments, the new schemes have been slow to offer opportunity to fill the funding gap on many farms. It'd be very useful to know, with full transparency, on how the budget released from the basic payment scheme has been returned to farmers. When could you provide that, please?
So, Richard, the point is the money is there, and it's one of the things. I got a lot of criticism when I arrived because we didn't get the things out before Christmas. But I wanted to make sure there were more opportunities for people to be able to apply for the SFI standards. We wanted to open those up to tenant farmers, and that took a bit of time. But we made those announcements at the end of January, so there is plenty of opportunity. I'm conscious that people are in different phases of their farming cycle, and when we start to see particularly the next reduction in the guaranteed income, clearly I expect more people will want to take advantage of the different options available. So we're just in that stage right now. We're still in the early stages of making that transition, and the money is there, the money is available, people can apply for it. I am very conscious, Richard, that there are some people who will probably end up getting a lot more out of the money, and then others decide they don't want to participate. I want to try and make it easier so that everybody can participate in one way or another, and having that flexibility, whether that's, I think there's 240 options now under the countryside stewardship, or indeed the more of the standards that are coming through. So, and more will come. We're still working on aspects of the SFI, but to some extent deliberately, as the proportion of the budget falls, that is open up to new opportunities, and that's when we can release a lot more different ways of how people can get their funding streams. But it's not all about government funding, of course. I know there's plenty of you who want to get that 8% return on using your land for solar farms and similar, and we want to see more diversification. It's why we've been working with other aspects of government department to try and see what more we can do to make it easier to have that diversification, and that's activities we're still working on.
And I'm conscious, before Christmas, you published the government's statutory environmental objectives on nature recovery, water, air quality, tree planting. And I'm very conscious that the environmental improvement plan suggests that much of this will fall to farmers and indeed the ELM scheme to deliver it. And are you relying on the 2.4 billion, or do you see a need to?
Of course, Minette. That's the whole point, that we've been on this journey. Michael Gove set it out 5 years ago, the Health and Harmony, and indeed it was in our manifesto. So we're moving that transition from guaranteed payments, where, as I say, over half the money went to 10% of the farmers and landowners just because of the amount of land they had. So here's an opportunity for many, many more people to have access to a greater part of that £2.4 billion in return for doing things, a lot of which will help the farming, whether that's healthier soils or different aspects of how we try and make that work. So it's actually opened up the opportunity for a lot of farmers to get a lot more money.
You don't think you need to double it or treble it?
No, I don't think we do. It's been a very clear journey. And okay, I accept some people like the assurance of a guaranteed income, but I'm trying to make sure we're delivering what we said we'd do in Health and Harmony. We're delivering what we said we would do in the 2019 manifesto. And that is that glide path, that smooth glide path is part of the transition in order to achieve it.
Lewis Barraclough.
Hello. Our uplands farm comprises of about 300 hectares, and I've applied for the SFI through the online portal, and we had 10 hectares available to put into SFI. With the reduction of BPS, higher inputs, and no more available money to our farm, how do you expect upland farmers to continue and grow as we provide such a good resilience framework of the rural countryside?
Yeah, so I think so I think one of the things that were only really the soil health standards available in 2022. That's why I worked really hard to try and make sure that there are going to be 6 standards available. Now, I know the window isn't open yet. I'm pressing the department to really get on and make sure that is there, and the RPA are busy working on that now, so that there will be more options, I expect, for you and farmers in your community to be able to access more support, potentially from the SFI, as well as other aspects of the schemes.
If I could have Thomas Binns and Jake Fines to the microphone. Just following on from the point that Lewis makes, though, you, within the Agricultural Act, have given the department, yourself, enormous powers to deal with market failure, which I know was something that George Eustace felt very, very strongly about. We've seen huge challenges in the pig sector, very similar challenges in the poultry sector. And going forwards, as we strike these trade deals at pace, BPS has been a big part of dealing with volatility and indeed market failure, which is why the department issued, and we were very grateful for it, the split payment coming in the summer and the winter. What plans have you got to deal with a market failure situation and use those powers that we took control of?
Well, I think right now, we're not seeing necessarily, I understand the costs are high. You know, food inflation is high, your input costs are high. That's why we're working on energy security. I'm not necessarily seeing a market failure. So,
we saw a market failure with pigs and poultry.
Well, I'm not sure that we've seen a market failure with poultry.
We had 1 billion less eggs in 2022 to 2019.
That's not necessarily a market failure. So, you know,
well, we've lost businesses on the back of...
I'm not denying that people have chosen potentially not to restock on certain things. That's why we're still going through our supply chain reviews, which I indicated earlier. We're close to concluding. Aspects are certainly on dairy and the pigs, and we will consider potentially other sectors. But, you know, frankly, sometimes it doesn't help when you have people, not you, Minette, it was somebody else, goes to Parliament, tells them there's this massive shortage of all these problems about the poultry sector. And what a surprise. Farmers are going nuts at Christmas time because they've got a glut of free-range chicken and they're not getting the prices they wanted for it. You know, consumers will respond. If we talk about the potential of food scandals, you know, we work so hard, as do you, to try and make sure biosecurity is there. We shouldn't be putting ideas into people's minds that somehow food is not safe. We need to keep working at food being safe. Otherwise, consumers will make different choices. So I'm conscious that, you know, there are challenges. I've accepted that about the input costs and similar. But I'm not saying, I don't believe that I think it's Section 20 of the Agriculture Act is there to be invoked because of some of the challenging economic situations that we have. I'm not seeing it as a market failure. I think you wanted to speak to Jake, is it?
Jake Fines and Thomas Binns.
Hey, I can talk about it.
Conference President.
Come on then.
Secretary of State, DEFRA proposes to publish a land use framework later this year. After 30 years of environmental schemes, farmers are endlessly being told we are one of the most nature-depleted countries in the world. Will the framework help to address this? And with all of the ambitious programs that you are committed to, are they committed to baselining our natural capital to inform our decision-making and promote private investment through stacking, through ensuring that we can share rather than spare, and we can produce food and environmental goods alongside one another?
Absolutely. I think the early lessons from the pilot landscape recovery projects are showing that as much food is being generated as before. And some of that will be aspects of productivity, of aspects like soil health, or slightly different ways of doing things. So this is why I believe it's a symbiotic relationship that can go hand in hand. Now, thinking through the land use framework, I'm very conscious that there are different pressures. You know, there may be people here who want to put solar farms, getting that guaranteed income. But there are others who clearly want to continue to farm that land as well. There's pressure aspects of housing, but overall, about 70% of our land is used for farming. So, and we see different levels of productivity right across the country. So I think there's still plenty of opportunity to land. This isn't about stopping farming, far from it. But it is making sure that we try and incentivise appropriately with this public goods, public money for public goods approach, so that we can get the best of both worlds in that regard. So we are working on the framework. I'm trying to make sure we include the other key departments in doing that, because land isn't exactly scarce, but land does vary in value, and I'm very conscious that the pricing of land can really make people change their minds on how they're going to use it. We're starting to see, for example, price of land not go to zero when you plant trees, but thinking ahead of what the carbon markets could be. And it's important that people have this diversification, I think, in their business, recognising some of the volatility, which I've already indicated, things like having the 5-year averaging profits is one way of perhaps helping smooth cash flow over that longer term. But, we will continue to develop it.
Before we come to Thomas Binns, could we have Matthew Donald and Tony Bambridge to the microphone, please? Thomas.
Thank you, President Conference. Here in Stoneleigh. Is it me, or do I feel that I've been living through an episode of Yes Minister for the last couple of days? It appears, and I welcome your intervention in trying to bring forward some SFI standards that are applicable for the uplands. And that's the first part of Yes Minister, we'll do that. But the standard of low input grassland will not be available for a majority of upland farmers because they're already delivering that particular measure under countryside stewardship or higher level stewardship. So whilst it's a blatantly good effort to try and bring something that will be available or could be available, it seems to be undermined by the fact that those farmers are already delivering that particular measure and many more which cannot be funded through SFI. So can I ask you, Secretary of State, to sit down with us? Let's look at the detail. Let's see where we can ease this pain for upland farmers by having measures that allow them access to try and retrieve some of the BPS that is continually taken away from their businesses.
Was that? So, Tom was it? Yeah, Tom. So Trudy Harrison is one of your local MPs up in Cumbria and is a very active voice within the department, particularly speaking about upland farmers and similar. I realised I didn't fully answer Jake's question earlier about stacking. So I have said to officials, we need to be a bit more relaxed about stacking. I want to bring people into this system. I don't want all of a sudden RPA trying to kind of do multiple complicated calculations. Now, we're at the early stage of this transition, and I want people to join it. So I'm happy to do some stacking. I don't know if that will be here forever, but I think that we need to get it going. And I'm not seeking to put farmers out of business, far from it. So I know this is a journey, and there's no point in just being unkind or being bureaucratic when actually some of the freedoms are getting out of the European Union is that we're not just following a system that was designed for 28 countries, and that we need to continue to try and make sure that we're doing what is right here. And of course, we're not doing the same thing across the UK either. So we are leading the way, but in leading the way, we all have to go together on this journey. I'm very conscious of that. I'll make sure that that gets done. So I will happily make sure that we get absolutely, Tom, your voice and the people you represent discussing this in detail on how we make it work.
Thank you.
Do you think that point, though, on going together, bearing in mind that Scotland and Wales are waiting until 2024, so they are still full direct support, full BPS payments, do you think it would not have been better to have agreed a framework?
No,
GB-wide?
I don't think the tail should wag the dog. We just need to get on with things. We've got a different farming sector. I mean, more broadly, DEFRA, of course, leads the way on food exports, so GI, different things. I think we've just done a pannage ham in the New Forest as a way of trying to help with trade. We've managed to get lamb back into the US. So, you know, we work right across the UK, you know, some magnificent food in different parts, but there's clearly a separation of in devolution, and I don't want to dictate to the Scots and the Welsh how they take forward their industry.
So they could stay on the scheme that they've got at the moment.
If they think that's the best thing to do, they're elected as a Scottish government. We've set out a plan very clearly 5 years ago that was reinforced in the manifesto, and we'll keep going along that journey. But as I say, it's about bringing people along the journey.
We're going to be really quick. Matthew Donald and Tony Bambridge. Very snappy.
Thank you. Morning, Minister. As a poultry producer, bird welfare is my #1 priority, and I'm seriously concerned about the proposals being looked at by the government regarding the welfare of animals during transport. Our collective goal should always be to deliver high standards of welfare, and the proposals around temperature will impact across all species. For poultry, it will grind the sector to a halt unnecessarily. My question is, how will you ensure any proposals imposed on the agricultural industry in regards to welfare at transport will deliver the welfare outcomes we are all striving towards?
Well, I was struck by something when I met Minette said recently that we seem to have an ever-rising ratchet on aspects of welfare. Now, British consumers care about animal welfare. I know you care about animal welfare and health. So it's important that we move along that transition, as it were, carefully. But I'm not intending to keep ratcheting up different things when I'm conscious of the transition everybody is going under with their industry. So I'm very happy to look at that more carefully about specific issues that concern you about the movement of animals within the country. But you know that consumers care about this stuff. So we need to we're representing not just farmers, but consumers as well. So we need to find a way forward on that.
Previous prime ministers have left legacy, haven't they?
Well, dare I say it? It's, you know, at the end of the day, I'm a politician, I'm elected, I'm appointed by the Prime Minister of the day. I'm very fortunate to have come back to DEFRA. You know, I spent 3 years mainly focusing on the environment. You know, we have a number of challenges. We have water quality that we want to improve. We've got pollution problems. Some of that we need to work more with aspects of parts of the country on some aspects of slurry.
I get all that, but
I'm just saying that we are, you know, we have a wide remit to cover, and that's why some of the interesting things we've just got to prioritise, and that's why I'm prioritising making sure we get this transition for profitable, sustainable, environmentally positive businesses right across our country.
But we have raised standards above the EU, and we still are. I mean, that's quite a challenge going forwards. If we sit above everyone else and we allow the imports in that don't even meet our current standards. Tony Bambridge.
Yes. Thank you, President, Secretary of State. You will know, Secretary, that farmers are price takers. We are seldom ever a price maker. And we deal with multinational retailers and food processors for much of what we produce, and often we get a poor deal, particularly in these inflationary times. There are one or two exemplars, it's fair, who deal with farmers, but for many, we are getting an unfair deal. Your government is very much interested in free trade. You've done many trade agreements. What will you do to try and ensure that farmers are treated fairly in the supply chain, and how will you do it?
Well, you'll be aware, I'm aware that the Grocery Code Adjudicator only deals with the direct supplier. We are doing some of these supply chain reviews. I've mentioned pigs and dairy. We'll consider potentially other sectors. But we were just discussing this earlier, weren't we? There's, you know, there could be a role for the producer organisations to be more active in this area, thinking of that. There's a lot of purchasing kind of collective power that goes on, and there may be an opportunity for the farming industry to consider some of those kind of doing it the other way. So I don't pretend I've got specific answers. It's not like government is going to start setting specific prices for different products. But I think there could well be opportunities on how we help with the entrepreneurialism aspect of making sure that farmers get a good deal.
You've been out to the US very recently. Their competition law is completely different to ours. Perhaps we could go to a US model and then we could intervene and talk about price. Life would be a lot easier, perhaps.
Well, different model, but you know, they're keen to come into the market. We are trying to make sure that we have a sensible trade deals in all our discussions with right across government on making sure that we get the best opportunities for British farmers as well, both here and abroad.
Secretary of State has to get a train at 11:15, and I know how long it takes to get to the station, and she's probably going to have to jog there already. So we appreciate your time. Sorry.
I'm not intending to jog there, don't worry.
Oh, right, okay. Look,
we might get on a bicycle.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Look, we thank you. I mean, we haven't touched the sides, really, of what is going on. Front page of every newspaper, salad shortages, Asda rationing, that will be happening.
We can't control the weather in Spain either, so... you know.
No, but we can be encouraging these guys to be producing here, and, you know, I'm conscious that's something that we really need to hone in on. There isn't time to discuss it now. We need to come back to it. Please, conference, show your appreciation to the Secretary of State.
Thank you. I'm going to dash. Thanks, Minette. Enjoy.